Welcome to the Railroads of Eaton County, Michigan. This was a clinic given to the Capital Division of the North Central Region of the National Model Railroading Association on March 11th, 2023. It's based almost entirely on the book Right on Track, published by the Eaton County Historical Society in 2019. If you ultimately wish to purchase a copy, the purchasing information is in the last slide of this presentation. And there's the front of the book. It's 178 pages long, and it's loaded with all sorts of information that is extra to what will be covered in this presentation. The presenter is Terry Davis, who was involved in 2019 with editing the book. And he's a model railroader and a rail enthusiast, primarily focusing on Maine 2-foot narrow gauge. And there is Terry in his natural habitat at the Wisconsin Wiscasset, Waterfield, and Farmington Railway Museum in Maine. And there's an example of his modeling work. These are two modules that he displays with the Great Lakes HON 30 modular group several times a year. This is a map of Eaton County, Michigan, and it shows the 4 railways that cross the county. There's a Northern Railway, there's the Grand Trunk, the Michigan Central, and then part of what was the Michigan Southern, Lakeshore and Michigan Southern on the right side of the county. And so 4 railroads in the county. They, as of 1911, when they came up with the class system, they were all Class 1 railroads. There are currently 7 Class 1 railroads in the United States, as opposed to the 132 in 1911. And the 2 railroads of the 4 that are left in Eaton County are both considered to be Class 1 railroads. They originally were the Grand Valley Railroad, the Northern Central Railroad, the Ionia and Lansing Railroad, the Peninsular Railroad of Michigan. And you can see that they all started construction at about the same time, several years after the Civil War. So the first railroad we'll talk about is what became the Michigan Southern. And you can see the blue outlines the actual trackage that was in the county, and the yellow circles the stations or depots, including Nashville, that was just over the county line. And our first railroad is the Grand Valley Railroad. It was chartered in the 1840s, actually constructed in the late 1860s, became Michigan Central in 1870, became part of the New York Central Railroad in 1916, Penn Central Railroad in 1968, and very shortly thereafter was abandoned. And this is a timetable. And as of 1871, which is very early on in this, you see that there are 3 trains per day stopping to let off and pick up passengers through Eaton County. The first station that we come to is the one that was located in Eaton Rapids. There's a beautiful picture. I love the bus that would transport you around the town once you got off the train. And you'll notice that the train is a fairly small locomotive, probably a 10-wheeler. And I couldn't tell you exactly what the date is, but since there are no motor cars, this is probably right around 1920 or a little earlier. And again, in the early 1900s, this is a picture of the same depot from the same perspective. If we go back, you can see the grain elevator in the background, And there it is again. It looks like chicken crates in the back of that wagon. And that is what the depot looks like now. And you can still see there is the grain elevator behind it. There's the interior showing the ticket window. And another shot of the interior. These were taken, I believe, in the last 15 years. And there's a Pacific style locomotive at the Eaton Rapids Depot about 1940. Then moving on further west, we come to Charlotte, Michigan. And this is the station that was built in 1902. I think it's especially fascinating to note the Concord coach or Western stagecoach style conveyance there. And also the locomotive, again, is a smaller locomotive, probably a 10-wheeler. Now, one of these pictures is from the south and one of these pictures is from the north. And there's another picture of the depot when it was in use. You can see the baggage carts. Also note that it has paved area right out to the train. Some of the depots in Eaton County did not have that. And there's another picture of the Michigan Central Depot in Charlotte, again with a horse-drawn bus. In the mid-60s, the depot sold and became Miller Ice Cream Restaurant. And there's a shot of it in 1965. And a couple of interior shots of what it looked like at that time. If you look up now in it, it is currently a Mexican restaurant and has been for about 10 years. You can see all of the roof detail is still there. It's a very nice little restaurant. Found a few interesting shipping invoices. This one was for 17 firkins of butter being transferred from Charlotte to Detroit in 1870. Okay, there's a picture of the Sanborn fire map for Charlotte from 1918, and you'll notice the train station, the 1902 train station, is located up to the northwest corner of this map. And you'll notice down at the bottom, there is the Michigan Central Railroad Freight House, which used to be the original depot when it was put in. And note that there are 4 tracks out in front of the some of the commodities. There's a hay barn, a coal barn, lumbering. So there's a lot of industrial traffic on this railroad. If we go back about 20 years, we come to the Sanborn map, and this is for 1895. This is before the 1902 station was built. And you see it's a freight house, and a small section is the passenger depot. And directly across the street is the Valley House and the Cottage House, which were 2 railroad hotels. Those buildings still exist. In fact, there's what remains of the Valley House that for the longest time was part of Fulton Lumber until it closed about 5 years ago. And there is the Cottage House, which is still inhabited and used as a residence. Okay, continuing west, we come to Chester Station. These pictures were taken during what I believe to have been an inventory trip through in 1919. You can see it is basically a frame station. with clapboard. Although the roof looks like it could be slate, which definitely would have been the way to have built it to last. And there's another picture of the station. You'll notice there is not anything paved outside. I'm assuming it would be kind of sloppy in rotten weather. Note the boxcar from the Hocking Hills Railroad. And then if you pivot and turn to the left 90 degrees, you're looking up the main drag through Charlotte. And this was probably taken at the same time as the previous two pictures. This structure still stands. The church is long gone. Also, the railroad crossing sign is interesting, and the cattle guards. This from 1912, and you'll notice there's an awful lot of rail traffic. Most of this is passenger related, so there were also freight trains coming through. The F's stand for flag stop, so you could get on by having the agent put a flag out. The train would stop for you if it wasn't scheduled to. And if you wanted to get off, you told the conductor and they would stop at whatever station you needed to get off. But you'll notice that at the height of the steam era, Chester Station had 5 passenger train stops, and it's a very small station, and the town was never more than 70 people. Charlotte had 11 per day, and Vermontville had 9 potential stops. There's another waybill, freight receipt for 20,000, I'm assuming that's board feet of cherry lumber that was shipped out of Chester to Detroit. And there's another freight receipt for 2 barrels of ale shipped from Chester to Marshall. As we continue west, we come to the old trestle right near Vermontville. This still stands and looks pretty much just like this. This picture was taken in 2019. The rails were pulled up in the 70s. And then we come to Vermontville, Michigan. This station was located to the south of town. Another picture of the depot at Vermontville. Another picture of the Vermontville depot. This was from about 20 years ago, and it shows the station completely overgrown. I do not believe it exists at this time. And nearby, there was remains of the original depot. This is from the early 80s. It had been used for storage for quite a number of years at this point. I thought this was fascinating. This is a hay shipment being loaded up to send out from Vermontville. And you'll notice it is a steam thresher that has pulled the carts in full of hay. As the railroad was being abandoned, there were 8 investors in the Detroit area that decided to continue to operate 40 miles of the railroad that went from Vermontville to Grand Rapids. And they called it the Kent-Berry-Eaton Connecting Railroad. And they had 1 locomotive anyway, possibly 2. The railroad only lasted about 3 years. It does have the distinction of being the only African-American owned railroad in the United States. And another small piece of the Michigan Central Railroad that's still available to be used. There's about a 2-mile section that goes from Charlotte to west of town, and it's owned now by the Michigan Southern Railroad, which has a dinner train that they ran pre-pandemic out of Charlotte, and they have another one over in Adrian. That's the Adrian and Blissfield. This railroad, as far as I know, this little section has not been used since the pandemic began. Okay, the next railroad we come to is the one that ran from the south of the county up to Lansing and involved the 4 stations that are circled here. And that was originally the Northern Central Railroad. Construction started in 1871, 72, thereabouts. It quickly changed names to the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern. In fact, I'm not sure the dates are a little off there because it was Lakeshore and Michigan Southern for quite a number of years until the New York Central bought it up. And ultimately, it was abandoned in the 1940s. So Eaton Rapids had 2 different railroads going through it, and so they had 2 different depots. And this is the depot for the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern. Notice again the interesting bus-like vehicle. I'm also fascinated by the semaphore signal that was out in front. When the dust settled after the New York Central had purchased the Michigan Southern and the Michigan Central, they found that they basically had 2 railroads owned by the same company going through this little town of Eaton Rapids. Rails End Park is located at the north end of town near the police department and fire department, and they have the original platform is still there. The station itself was moved several blocks over and became a dwelling for a while. I think it's had businesses and it's been a dwelling. And we move a little further north, we come to the Kingsland station, and I'm not exactly sure, but I believe it's just this little shed here. And you notice the cattle guards again to keep the cattle off the tracks and from wandering off. There is a rather out of focus, but obviously late 30s, early 40s train passing through Kingsland. And there's a monument at the depot site. And again, that's basically the picture that was shown earlier. And in 1941, the depot is no longer being used. Continuing north, we come to the remains of the train trestle at Diamonddale over the Grand River. This was taken about 5 years ago. And there's the depot that was for the Lakeshore Michigan Southern in Diamonddale. Another shot of the depot. You notice the semaphore. Also notice there is not really a platform or anything there. Okay, we go to the third railroad then. It's the one that ran from Lansing down towards Battle Creek. And again, blue designates where the tracks were, and the yellow circles the depots. And we start at the south end. Well, first of all, it was originally the Peninsular Railroad of Michigan. It was purchased and became part of the Grand Trunk Western Railroad in 1900. Became Canadian National Railway in 1991, and it's currently CN North America. I found this to be very interesting. You notice the railroad crossing sign is says "Look out for the cars," which is rather interesting. The term "cars" was widely used at the time of the Civil War to talk about rolling stock, and I'm assuming that's what it's saying is look out for the cars, for the people that are in automobiles. This was in 1910. There's the Bellevue Depot. It's a beautiful depot. This must have been a postcard because of the postmark on it. And again, the semaphore system. There's another picture of the Bellevue Depot. This is a shot of it later in its life after the tower had been removed. And there's an earlier picture with the tower still in place. And this is the depot as it currently exists. I believe it's used as a business. This is an interesting picture. It shows what looks to be an American-style locomotive, a 440, which would make this right around the turn of the century, the last century. A few pictures of the Bellevue train wreck of 1967. There's much more in the book about these wrecks and where they occurred and what was going on than what I have covered here. It's fascinating. This was 1967, and the individual in the middle there, that could easily have been me because that's the haircut I was wearing at that time. And then we move a little further north. We come to Olivet Station, which was located 3 miles north of Olivet College. The college was started in 1855. The railroad went in the 1870s or thereabouts, and it was not compatible to run it through the town of Olivet. So for many, many years, they had the Olivet bus, which was the primary way that students would come into the station and then would get down to the college. There is a little bit of a platform here, I see. And Lester Taggart was a Civil War veteran, was the telegraph operator at Ainger Station or the Olivet Station. And this fella, I can't remember what the name is, but he ran this thing for about 30 years and made 2 or 3 trips a day up to the railroad station from Olivet town. And there you can see the Olivet bus again on the right-hand side in 1911. And we move further north and we come to the second train station in Charlotte. This is the Grand Trunk Western Station, about 1910. This is another picture of it in 1912. And that looks like a 10-wheeler, smaller locomotive. It's another shot of the depot. And this is what the depot looked like in 2019. I believe it's currently being used for storage by the nearby grain operation. Further north, we come to Potterville. You can see the depot at the end of the street. I think it's fascinating to look and notice all of the wagons here that have pulled in straight. So obviously horses did have a reverse gear. And there was a major derailment in 2002 and 2006. One of those involved some tank cars, and the town was evacuated for a brief period of time. Okay, further north, just outside of Lansing, we come to the Millet Depot, which was moved several blocks over and is now the home of the Lansing Model Railroad Club. You'll notice to the left of the station is a switch tower, which was purchased and moved by the Lansing Model Railroad Club about 10 years ago. And there's a picture of the Michigan Avenue Tower with new windows in it. And this was just a picture that was not affiliated with any particular depot, but this was down in Battle Creek or near Battle Creek. And it shows a 10-wheeler. Okay, the last railroad ran across the northern tier townships and went through these stations. And it originally started life as the Ionia and Lansing Railroad, changed its name in 1871, changed its name again in 1876, was consolidated or purchased by the Pierre Marquette Railroad in 1900, became Chesapeake and Ohio in 1950s, and it's currently CSX Transportation. And there's a lot of rail traffic that moves across that. And Grand Ledge, just out of Lansing, there's the depot. It's kind of interesting to note that it's on a curve. There's the trestle from about 5 years ago. And there's another picture of the trestle, 1912. An earlier picture, that looks like a 440 American-style locomotive in 1887. And an excursion group that gathered near the trestle for a picnic. When it was determined to cancel passenger service, the depot was sold and needed to be moved across the river and to a new location. Actually, this may have been when the station was still operational, because I do believe it was still used in that second location. But there's a picture of it being moved across the trestle on a couple of flat cars. And you'll notice that is a seriously old American-style locomotive with the fluted domes. I'm going to guess this was probably from right around 1900 or 1910. So yes, I was incorrect. The railroad station would have been in use after that. There's the depot at Mulligan, Michigan. Another picture from 1887. And a Mulligan, the train wreck in 1908 at Mulligan. I believe this is an Atlantic-style locomotive, 442. It split a switch that had not been fully closed and derailed. And it really messed up the locomotive. There's the depot at Sunfield. It's a very nice water tower. Another shot of the Sunfield depot. Train wreck in 1901 at Sunfield. And just across the county line, there's the Woodbury Depot. The book was written by a large number of people, and there are a lot of different chapters on a lot of different subjects. We appreciate the contributions by all of those people. And this was put together by the Eaton County Historical Commission. There's a list of the members and also contact information. There are stories about the circus being brought into town by railroad. There's another circus train. I think it's interesting to see these very lightly sided gondolas. There's elephants being moved to the site of where the circus is going to be set up. There's also a fictional article written by one of the contributors about life as a hobo. And there's an article on Bill Bercampus, who lived in Charlotte and created about 30 of these pen and ink drawings, and was instrumental in the creation of the Steam Preservation Institute in Owasso, which has 1225, which they obtained from Michigan State University, where it had been parked for a number of years in the late 70s, and have restored that locomotive. If you would like to buy a copy of this book, it is $20. If you go to the museum, it's $25 post-paid. The QR code does not currently work, but it will in the future. My recommendation is that you call the number of the museum between 9 and 4, Monday through Friday, and place your order. And I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Feel free to leave comments if you have anything that you'd like to say.